Welcome to our insightful and impressive story today. Millionaire chooses mistress over pregnant black wife, but 5 years later, he regrets it. In this gripping narrative, we delve into the life of a wealthy businessman who finds himself caught in a web of personal turmoil. Torn between his responsibilities and desires, he makes a life-altering decision that will have profound consequences. Choosing his mistress over his pregnant wife seems like an enticing escape at first, but reality soon catches up with him. Our story begins with a glimpse into the luxurious lifestyle of our protagonist, a self-made millionaire who seemingly has it all. Yet beneath the surface of his success lies a deep-seated discontentment that drives him to seek solace outside his marriage. As he becomes entangled with his mistress, he is blind to the impact his choices have on his devoted wife, who is expecting their child. Time passes, and the consequences of his decision begin to unfold. The once promising affair starts to lose its luster, and he is forced to confront the emptiness it leaves behind. Meanwhile, his wife, now a single mother, faces her own struggles but finds strength and resilience in unexpected places. The passage of 5 years reveals the stark contrast between the paths each has taken. In a poignant twist of fate, our protagonist is compelled to reflect on the life he left behind. The mistakes he made weigh heavily on him, and regret becomes an unwelcome companion. As he witnesses the happiness his wife has found without him, he must grapple with the realization of what he has lost. Inform us if you are enthusiastic about this narrative. If you are, press 1 if you found the video to be enjoyable. If this is not the case, press 0. Your comments are a great source of motivation for me to collect more stories that are uplifting and meaningful.
The ballroom of the Metropolitan Club in Manhattan glowed with the opulence characteristic of New York high society parties. Alice Henderson adjusted her emerald green dress over her 5-month-old belly, feeling the baby move as if protesting against the false atmosphere. Her fingers instinctively caressed her belly, seeking comfort from the crossed eyes that followed her around the room. The buzz of conversation died down when Henry Blackwood, her husband, entered the room. Tall and imposing in his Italian suit, he exuded the confidence typical of men born in a cradle of gold. Alice watched as he deliberately avoided her gaze, heading for the bar where Natalia Reynolds was waiting for him. "You look radiant tonight," whispered Charlotte, her best friend and confidant, approaching with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "But your eyes give you away." "Has something happened?" Alice took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to stain her flawless makeup. "I found messages on his cell phone," she confessed quietly. "It's not just rumors, Charlotte. Henry and Natalia. It's been going on for months." Charlotte frowned, her eyes shooting towards the couple in the bar. Natalia, in her early 20s and wearing a provocative red dress, was laughing at something Henrique said. "That viper," muttered Charlotte. "You need to confront him, Alice." "I've tried," Alice replied, her voice laced with hurt. "He denies it, says it's just business, that I'm paranoid because of the pregnancy." The moment was interrupted when Henrique, visibly altered by alcohol, took to the small stage to make a speech. Alice felt her heart race. No speech was scheduled for that evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice echoed through the hall, "tonight is special, not just because of the contracts we've closed, but because—" He paused dramatically, his eyes fixed on Natalia. "Because I've finally understood what it means to be truly in love." The silence that followed was deafening. Alice felt the ground disappear beneath her feet as Henrique continued. "Some of you may be wondering about my marriage. Well, sometimes we make mistakes. We get carried away by obligations, expectations." Henry's words cut like razors. Alice noticed the looks of pity directed at her, the growing whispering, the shocked expressions. Natalia, in her corner, wore a triumphant smile. Her legs trembling, Alice walked to the stage. "Enough," her voice, though low, carried a force that silenced the room. "You're not going to do this. Not with our son." Henrique laughed, a cruel sound that Alice would never forget. "Our son. Please, Alice. Everyone knows that this marriage was a mistake from the start. You never belonged in this world." The sound of the slap echoed through the hall. Alice didn't even realize she had raised her hand until she felt the sting in her palm. "You're right," she said, her voice shaking with anger and determination. "I don't belong in this world of lies and appearances. Neither will my son." Turning to the stunned audience, Alice raised her head with dignity. "I apologize for the spectacle, gentlemen, but sometimes we need to go through humiliating situations to see our true strength." As she walked to the exit, Charlotte by her side, Alice felt her son move again. This time, however, the movement seemed to be a sign of approval. Silent tears streamed down her face, but her mind was made up. That would be the last time she allowed Henry Blackwood to make her feel inferior. In the cab, as Manhattan disappeared through the window, Alice made a silent promise to the baby in her womb. "Let's start again, my love, just the two of us. And I promise you'll never know anything but true love and dignity." 5 years passed like the pages of a hastily turned book. Alice watched the movement of Flatbush Avenue from the window of her Brooklyn office as the last rays of the sun tinted the sky pink and orange. Her small digital marketing consultancy, started in a moment of desperation and determination, now occupied an entire floor of the office building. "Mommy?" Gabriel's voice echoed through the room, interrupting her thoughts. The 5-year-old ran towards her, his dark curls swaying with each step, his eyes shining with excitement. "Look what I did at school today." Alice knelt down to meet her son, receiving the colorful drawing he proudly held out. It was a representation of 2 stick figures, one larger and one smaller, surrounded by hearts. "It's you and me, Mommy," Gabriel explained, pointing to the figures. "The teacher asked us to draw our family." Alice's heart squeezed slightly. It wasn't the first time she had noticed the absence of a father figure in Gabriel's drawings. He never asked directly about his father, but Alice noticed his curiosity in the small details. The way he watched other fathers picking up their children from school, how he paid special attention to complete families in the park. "It's beautiful, my love," she smiled, hugging her son. "How about we go home? We can make that special pasta you love, with lots of cheese." Gabriel's eyes sparkled even more. "With all the cheese in the world," promised Alice, putting away her belongings. Rose, her executive assistant and close friend, appeared in the doorway. "Alice, before you go, this arrived for you." She held out a thick envelope with the letterhead of one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. Alice felt a shiver run down her spine. After opening the envelope, her suspicions were confirmed. They were documents relating to Henry. Apparently, he was facing serious financial problems and was requesting a review of his pension agreement. "Rose, can you take Gabriel to his car? I need to make a quick call," Alice asked, trying to keep her voice calm. As soon as she was alone, Alice dialed the number of Charlotte, who, as well as being a friend, had become her lawyer. "Have you seen it?" asked Charlotte without preamble. "I just got it. What's going on?" "His company's shares have plummeted. It seems that Natalia has been spending fortunes, and some risky investments have gone wrong. Henrique is practically bankrupt." Alice closed her eyes, remembering the arrogant man who had humiliated her years ago. "And what exactly does he want?" "To renegotiate the terms. But Alice, there's more. He wants to meet Gabriel." The world seemed to spin for a moment. For 5 years, Henrique hadn't shown the slightest interest in getting to know his son. His only interactions were limited to the monthly pension deposits. "Why now?" Alice muttered, more to herself than to Charlotte. "People change when they lose everything," Charlotte replied softly, "or when they realize what really matters." Alice walked over to the window again, watching Rose and Gabriel playing near the car. Her son was laughing, carefree, oblivious to the approaching storm. "I'll think about it," she finally said. "But I need to make sure this isn't just another one of his games." After hanging up, Alice went downstairs to find her son. On the way home, as Gabriel chatted about his day at school, she couldn't stop thinking. The memories of that night at the Metropolitan Club still stung, but something in her heart told her that maybe, just maybe, her son deserved the chance to meet his father, even if only to understand his own origins. At home, as they prepared the promised pasta together, Gabriel spilled grated cheese all over the worktop, laughing at the mess. Alice watched him, amazed at his innocence and joy. She had built a safe world for him, protecting him from the shadows of the past. But did she have the right to keep him away from his father forever? "Mum, why are you crying?" asked Gabriel, noticing a solitary tear trickling down Alice's cheek. "It's the cheese and love," she lied, smiling and wiping her face. "Sometimes it makes your eyes water." That night, after putting Gabriel to bed, Alice sat on her balcony, gazing out at the city lights. The envelope from the law firm weighed like lead in her hands. Inside, it wasn't just papers, it was the possibility of change, of forgiveness, of new beginnings, but also the risk of more pain, more disappointments. The night breeze ruffled her hair as she made her decision. For Gabriel, she would face her fears. For him, she would give Henry a chance to prove that he had changed. But this time, it would be on her terms. The office on the top floor of the Empire State Building was no longer as bright as it once was. Henrique Blackwood looked out of the panoramic window at the city he once considered his own, feeling the weight of his wrong choices with every breath. The walls, once decorated with valuable works of art, now displayed only lighter rectangular marks on the wallpaper. Mr. Blackwood, the voice of his new secretary, he could no longer afford his old one, sounded through the intercom. Your ex-wife is here. Henry adjusted his tie, an automatic reflection of his glory days. You can send her in. When Alice walked through the door, Henrique felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, emanating a confidence he had never noticed during his marriage. Her impeccable navy blue suit and upright posture showed that she was no longer the woman he had humiliated 5 years ago. Henry, she greeted coldly, refusing to sit down when he gestured to the chair. Alice, thank you for coming. Her voice came out huskier than she had intended. I imagine you've received the documents. I did, she replied, placing the folder on the table. But before we discuss any agreement, I want to understand your true intentions with Gabriel. The name of his son hit Henrique like a punch in the gut. On his desk was a photo of the boy, obtained through private investigators, smiling on a swing in the park. I've made terrible mistakes, Alice, he began, running his hand through his now slightly graying hair. Natalia, I'm not interested in knowing about Natalia, Alice interrupted him. I want to know why, after 5 years, you've decided you want to meet your son. Henrique stood up and walked over to the window. The New York sky was heavy, threatening a storm. When you have everything, Alice, it's easy to overlook what really matters. Natalia spent millions on jewelry, travel, whims. I allowed it, of course. My ego loved having a stunning young woman by my side. He paused, turning to face her. But you know what I discovered, that when the money runs out, people show you who they really are. Natalia left me 3 months ago, taking what was left of my fortune with her. And now you want to get close to your son because you're broke? Alice's voice carried a mixture of contempt and incredulity. No, Henry protested, his voice breaking. I want to meet him because I've realized that I've wasted years of my life chasing things that mean nothing. Because every night, when I close my eyes, I see his little face on the ultrasound, the last image I have of my son. Alice remained silent, studying the man in front of her. The years had not been kind to Henry. Deep wrinkles marked his face, and his eyes, once arrogant, now carried a palpable sadness. Gabriel is a sensitive boy, she finally said. He draws our family, just the two of us. He's never asked about you directly, but I see how he observes other parents. If I allow you into his life, I need to be absolutely sure that you won't hurt him. I'll do anything, Henry replied quickly. I accept your conditions, all of them. My conditions are simple. Alice crossed her arms. First, you'll go to therapy, regularly. I want monthly reports on your progress. Secondly, the meetings will be supervised, at least at first. Third, at the slightest sign that you're damaging my son's emotional well-being, it's over. Henrique nodded, swallowing. What about alimony? We'll keep the current amount, Alice declared. I know you're having financial problems, but Gabriel shouldn't have to pay for this. Sell your luxury cars, your apartment on Park Avenue. Show that you're really willing to change your priorities. A solitary tear ran down Henry's cheek, the first Alice had ever seen him shed. You've become an extraordinary woman, Alice. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate that sooner. I'm not doing this for you, Henry, she replied, walking to the door. I'm doing it for our son. He deserves the chance to meet his father, even if it took that father 5 years to want to meet him. Before leaving, Alice turned around one last time. Monday, at 4 in the afternoon, in the park near my house. Don't be late. When the door closed, Henrique collapsed in his chair, staring at Gabriel's photo. The storm had finally begun, washing out the windows of the Empire State Building. Somewhere in that city, his son was playing, laughing, growing up, and for the first time in 5 years, there was a chance to be part of that life. Prospect Park was displaying its autumn colors on that Monday afternoon. Alice arrived 20 minutes ahead of schedule, watching Gabriel run through the fallen leaves, his blue scarf fluttering in the wind. She hadn't yet told her son about the meeting, fearing his reaction, or worse, Henry's absence. "Mum, look at all the leaves!" Gabriel shouted, throwing up a handful and laughing as they fell on his head. Alice nervously checked her watch. 15:55. Her heart raced at the sight of Henrique walking towards her. He was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, a drastic change from his usual Italian suits. In his hands, he carried a package. "You came," Alice murmured, more to herself than to him. "5 minutes early," Henry replied, his voice trembling slightly. His eyes were fixed on Gabriel, who continued to play, oblivious to the tension of the moment. Alice took a deep breath. "Gabriel," she called softly. The boy came running, stopping abruptly when he noticed the stranger standing next to his mother. "Darling, there's someone who would very much like to meet you." Gabriel approached cautiously, partially hiding behind Alice's legs. His curious eyes studied Henrique intently. "Hi, Gabriel." Henrique knelt down so that he was at his son's height. I'm your father." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Gabriel looked at his mother for confirmation, and Alice nodded gently. "You left," Gabriel finally said, his voice small but firm. "Why?" The question struck Henry like a thunderbolt. Alice noticed his hands trembling as he gripped the package tighter. "I made a very big mistake," replied Henry, his voice breaking. "I was a foolish man who didn't know what was really important, but I'm here now if you'll let me try to be your father." Gabriel processed the words for a moment, his serious expression so reminiscent of Alice that Henry felt his heart squeeze. "I brought you something," Henrique offered the package. "It's not much, but—" Gabriel looked at Alice again, receiving another nod before accepting the gift. When he opened it, his eyes widened. It was a set of state-of-the-art building blocks. "Your mother told me that you like to build things," Henry explained. "I thought we could build something together, if you like." A small smile began to form on Gabriel's face. "Can we make a castle?" "We can make the biggest castle this park has ever seen," Henry replied, feeling a wave of relief. Over the next hour, Alice watched father and son sitting on a park bench, assembling increasingly elaborate structures. Gabriel, initially shy, gradually began to loosen up, animatedly explaining his architectural ideas to Henrique, who listened with undivided attention. "Mom, come and see!" Gabriel called out at one point. "Dad taught me how to make a drawbridge that really works." The word "daddy" made Henry freeze momentarily, his eyes meeting Alice's. She recognized in them a mixture of gratitude and love. She recognized in them a mixture of gratitude and deep regret. As the sun began to set, Alice announced that it was time to go. Gabriel protested at first, but acquiesced when Henrique promised to bring more pieces next time, if his mother allowed it. "Can I see him again?" Henrique asked Alice quietly, as Gabriel put the pieces away. "Next week, same time," she replied. "But Henrique, don't promise things you can't keep. He's already getting attached." "I know," he nodded solemnly. "I won't let him down. Not this time." Before they left, Gabriel surprised everyone by giving Henry a quick hug. "Thanks for the present, Dad." On the way home, Gabriel talked non-stop about the projects he wanted to build at the next meeting. Alice listened to him, her heart divided between the joy of seeing her son happy and the fear of what the future might bring. That night, after putting Gabriel to bed, she found an envelope that Henrique had discreetly slipped into her handbag. Inside was a letter and the receipt for his first therapy session. "I'm trying," the letter said. "Not for the money, not for redemption, but for the chance to be the father Gabriel deserves. Thank you for today, Alice. Thank you for not letting my mistakes define our son's future." Alice put the letter in her drawer, along with the drawing Gabriel had done at school. Tomorrow, perhaps, he would draw his family differently. Charlotte Montgomery's office occupied an elegant penthouse in Tribeca, overlooking the Hudson River. Alice settled into the leather armchair, while her friend and lawyer went through Henry's latest financial reports. "He sold the apartment on Park Avenue," Charlotte commented, running her fingers across the tablet screen. "And 2 of the 3 luxury cars. Looks like he's really taking his terms seriously." Alice nodded, distractedly turning the teacup in her hands. "Gabriel asks about him every day. Last night, he wanted to know if his father could come to his Christmas performance at school." "And you'll let him?" Before Alice could answer, the office door opened abruptly. Natalia Reynolds entered like a hurricane, her high heels echoing on the marble floor. "So it's true," Natalia declared, her eyes sparking with anger. "You're letting Henry get close to the boy." Charlotte stood up immediately. "This is a private meeting. I'll call security." "No need," Alice interjected, remaining calm. "Let me hear what she has to say." Natalia threw a gossip magazine on the table. On the cover was a photo of Henrique and Gabriel in the park, building with blocks. The sensationalist headline read, "Blackwood heir rebuilds family after financial scandal." "Do you really think he's changed?" Natalia laughed bitterly. "Henry is a manipulator. He's using the boy to clean up his image and regain the trust of investors." Alice studied the woman in front of her. Natalia was still stunning, but there was something different in her eyes, a glint of barely concealed desperation. "Why do you care, Natalia?" Alice asked softly. "You left him. You took a fortune with you. What happened to all that money?" A blush crept up Natalia's neck. "That's none of your business." "Actually, it is," Charlotte intervened, picking up a folder. "Considering that part of the money you spent was intended for Gabriel's educational fund." Natalia paled visibly. "I didn't know. Henry never mentioned—" "Of course not," Alice sighed. "He was too busy trying to impress you with expensive gifts and luxurious trips." A heavy silence filled the room. Through the window, dark clouds loomed, foreshadowing a storm. "He cried for you, you know," Natalia said suddenly. "When I realized the money was running out and I left him, I've never seen him cry for anything before, but for you—" She paused, swallowing. "For you and the boy. He cries to this day." Alice felt her heart squeeze. "That doesn't erase what he did." "No," Natalia agreed, her haughty posture beginning to crumble. "But maybe he really has changed. I destroyed him, Alice, completely. And yet the only thing he regrets is losing you both." Tears began to run down Natalia's perfectly made-up face. "I came here to warn you, to tell you that he was up to something, but the truth is that I'm jealous. Jealous because, even after everything, you still have something real, something that all the money in the world can't buy." Charlotte offered Natalia a handkerchief, which she accepted with trembling hands. "What are you going to do now?" Alice asked. "Go back to Ohio," Natalia replied with a sad smile. "My mother always said that New York would swallow me alive. I guess she was right." When Natalia left, leaving only the echo of her heels and the smell of expensive perfume, Charlotte turned to Alice. "Well, that was unexpected." Alice picked up the magazine, looking at the picture of Henry and Gabriel. There was something genuine in her ex-husband's smile, something she had never seen during their years of marriage. "Do you know what's most ironic?" Alice commented, tracing the image with her fingers. "Henry had to lose everything to finally find something worthwhile." Her phone vibrated. A message from Henrique, with a picture of tickets for the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. "Gabriel mentioned that he's never seen the Rockettes," the message read. "Can we take him next weekend? I promise to follow all the rules." Alice smiled, remembering the sparkle in her son's eyes when he talked about his father. Perhaps some people really did need to touch rock bottom to find their true essence. "I'll let him go to the Christmas performance," Alice finally decided. "Gabriel deserves to have happy memories with his father, and Henry, well, he deserves the chance to create them." The snowflakes danced gently against the dark December sky, turning Manhattan into a Christmas postcard. In the Riverside Elementary School auditorium, Alice was adjusting the bow tie on Gabriel's little tuxedo, while other mothers were putting the finishing touches to their little actors. "Is he here yet, Mommy?" Gabriel asked for the third time in 5 minutes, his eyes constantly on the auditorium door. "Not yet, love," Alice replied, discreetly checking her cell phone. No message from Henrique. The school Christmas performance was an important event. Gabriel would be playing the lead role in the musical, a little elf helping Santa rediscover the true meaning of Christmas. Over the last few weeks, he had practiced tirelessly, determined to impress not only the audience, but especially his father. 5 minutes to start," announced the music teacher, Mrs. Bennett, clapping her hands to get the children's attention. Alice felt her heart squeeze at the sight of Gabriel's anxious expression. "Darling, sometimes the traffic—" He promised. "Mommy," Gabriel interrupted, his small voice laden with expectation. He said he'd never break a promise again. Just then, the back door of the auditorium opened and Henry rushed in, shaking the snow off his coat. His eyes scanned the room until he found Gabriel, and his face lit up with a genuine smile. "Sorry I'm late, champ," he said, approaching. "The subway was delayed because of the snow, but I wouldn't have missed it for the world." "Subway?" Alice couldn't hide her surprise. The Henrique she had known would never have considered using public transport. "I sold my last car yesterday," he explained, smoothing out a small package in his hands. "But I brought something special for good luck." Gabriel opened the package carefully, revealing a small gold pin in the shape of a star. "It was my father's," Henrique explained, pinning the brooch on his son's tuxedo. "He wore it at every important presentation. Now it's yours." Alice watched the interaction with a mixture of excitement and caution. In recent weeks, Henrique had shown himself to be present and dedicated, attending all the scheduled meetings and strictly following their conditions. But years of disappointment had taught her to keep her expectations in check. "All the actors to their seats," called out Mrs. Bennet. "Break a leg, son." Henry smiled, using the theatrical expression Gabriel had taught him. While the children organized themselves backstage, Alice and Henry made their way to the audience, taking separate seats as agreed. The musical began, and Gabriel shone on stage. His clear voice filled the auditorium during the songs, and his lines were delivered with surprising confidence for a 5-year-old. From her seat, Alice could see Henry leaning forward, completely absorbed in the performance, his eyes shining with pride. During the interval, Alice was taken aback by a conversation she overheard between Henrique and another parent. "Your son is very talented," the man commented. "Yeah, he's amazing," Henrique replied. "You know, I missed 5 years of his life, 5 Christmases, 5 birthdays. Now every moment is precious, every smile, every achievement. It's like a gift that I don't deserve, but that I'm grateful for every day." Alice felt her defenses begin to drop, even against her will. There was a raw sincerity in Henrique's voice that she had never heard before. After the performance, Gabriel ran into his father's arms, still wearing his elf costume. "Did you see, Dad? Did you see when I did the solo?" "I saw every second of it, champ," Henrique replied, hugging him tightly. "You were the best leprechaun this stage has ever seen. Can we get some hot chocolate?" Gabriel asked hopefully, looking between his parents. "Please, Mom?" Alice hesitated. It wasn't in the plans, but the sparkle in her son's eyes was irresistible. "All right, but just a little." "It's late." In the small cafeteria next to the school, while Gabriel animatedly told her about the musical backstage, Alice watched as Henrique gently wiped his son's chocolate mustache, as he paid full attention to every word, as his eyes filled with love with every laugh. "You know," Gabriel said suddenly, "some of my friends have 2 Christmases, one at Mom's and one at Dad's." The silence that followed was heavy. Alice and Henrique exchanged tense glances. "Gabriel," Alice began softly, "sometimes things are a little more complicated." "But I've been good," he insisted, his big eyes pleading. "And Dad's being nice too, isn't he?" Henry swallowed. "Son, your mother is right. Some things take time." "But you promised never to leave," Gabriel whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "And I won't," Henry replied firmly. "Even if we can't have 2 Christmases yet, I promise I'll be here, whenever you need me." That night, after putting Gabriel to bed, Alice found Henry still standing in the doorway of the building, watching the snow fall. "He really believes in you," she said softly. "I know," Henry replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "And this time, Alice, I'm not going to let him down. Not him, not you." Dr. Rebecca Martinez's office exuded a welcoming atmosphere, with its soft-toned walls and panoramic view of snow-covered Central Park. Henrique adjusted himself on the brown leather sofa, while the therapist reviewed her notes from the last few sessions. "You seem tense today," observed Dr. Martinez, her keen eyes studying her patient's body language. "I've received an offer," Henrique began, his restless hands playing with the sleeve of his sweater. "A company in Dubai. They want me to restructure their financial operations. The salary is substantial, and that upsets you because it would mean 3 months away from New York, away from Gabriel." Henrique stood up and walked over to the window. "Before, I wouldn't have thought twice. I'd get on the first flight, close the deal, get my fortune back. But now your priorities have changed," added the therapist. "Gabriel has a piano recital next month. He only started lessons 2 months ago, but he's so committed." An involuntary smile appeared on her lips. "He plays Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with such concentration that his tongue shows at the corner of his mouth, just like Alice when she's focused on something." Dr. Martinez made some notes. "Have you talked to Alice about the proposal?" "Not yet. I'm afraid of her reaction. I've managed to build a relationship of trust over the last few months, and Gabriel—" He paused, swallowing. "He's finally calling me Dad without hesitation." At that moment, his phone vibrated. A message from Alice with a photo of Gabriel proudly showing an A+ on his math assignment. "He insisted I send it to you," the message said. "You know, Henrique, Doctor." Martinez spoke softly. Sometimes our greatest tests don't come in the form of great tragedies, but seemingly simple choices. What does this job in Dubai really mean to you? Financial redemption, he answered promptly. The chance to prove that I'm still capable, that I'm not a failure. What if you were already proving it in other ways? Ways that can't be measured in dollars? The question hung in the air as Henrique reflected. His thoughts were interrupted by another message, this time a video of Gabriel practicing the piano, his small hands moving carefully over the keys. When I was at the top, Henrique began, his voice breaking, I had everything money could buy, but I never received messages like that. I never had someone eagerly waiting to show me their achievements. And how does that make you feel? Rich, he replied, surprising himself with his choice of word. Richer than I've ever been with all my bank accounts full. Leaving the session, Henrique walked to the Metropolitan Museum, where he had arranged to meet Alice and Gabriel for a visit to the dinosaur exhibition. On the way, he passed his old stock brokerage, the imposing building where he used to spend 12 hours a day trading millions. Gabriel spotted him first, running towards him with contagious enthusiasm. Dad, you won't believe it. There's a giant T-Rex inside. Alice approached more slowly, noticing something different about Henry's countenance. Is everything all right? I need to talk to you, he replied. But first, how about we meet this T-Rex? For the next 2 hours, Henry watched his son marvel at each exhibit, asking endless questions about each extinct species. Alice occasionally translated the information on the plaques into terms Gabriel could understand, her infinite patience reminding Henry of why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. In the museum cafe, while Gabriel savored his chocolate milkshake, Henrique finally gathered the courage to tell him about Dubai. I'm not going to accept it, he concluded, surprising Alice. 5 years ago, I chose money and status over family. I won't make the same mistake twice. Henry, Alice began, her voice softening, you don't have to turn down a professional opportunity to prove your commitment. I'm not proving anything to anyone but myself, he replied, watching Gabriel draw dinosaurs on his napkin. For the first time in my life, I understand what really matters. And what is that? Alice asked, even though she already knew the answer. This, he gestured to the present moment. Chocolate milkshakes, drawings of dinosaurs, beginners, piano recitals, all those little things I used to consider insignificant. Gabriel held up his drawing, showing 3 toothpick figures next to a smiling T-Rex. Look, it's us. Alice and Henrique exchanged a meaningful look. In recent weeks, Gabriel's drawings had always included 3 people, no longer just 2. It's beautiful, son. Henrique smiled, carefully tucking the napkin into his wallet. Much better than any Dubai contract. Spring arrived in New York, bringing not only flowers to the city's parks, but also subtle changes in the dynamic between Alice, Henrique, and Gabriel. Alice's office was buzzing with the excitement of a Friday afternoon when her assistant, Rose, announced an unexpected visitor. Charlotte's here, Rose informed her, her expression worried. She seems upset. Alice had barely had time to get up when her friend and lawyer entered, carrying a thick briefcase and a serious expression. We need to talk, Charlotte declared, closing the door behind her. It's about Henry. Alice's heart raced instantly. What happened? Charlotte spread some papers on the table. Remember that Arab investor who was interested in your company? I found out that he has connections with Henrique. What do you mean? Apparently, when Henrique turned down the Dubai offer, he redirected some investors to promising companies in New York. Charlotte paused significantly. Including yours. Alice sat down heavily, processing the information. Are you saying that the contracts we closed last month were influenced by Henry? Charlotte added. He didn't get anything out of it, Alice. In fact, he gave up the commission he would have received to ensure that the investors chose his company. A whirlwind of emotions ran through Alice. Anger, confusion, gratitude, all mixed into a tight knot in her chest. Why would he do that? She muttered, more to herself than to Charlotte. Maybe you should ask him, Charlotte suggested softly. He's downstairs, in the cafe around the corner. He asked me to give you these documents. Alice found Henry exactly where Charlotte had said, sitting at a table at the back, watching the street go by through the window. He looked thinner, but also more serene than in the days of his financial prosperity. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, sitting down in front of him without preamble. Henry didn't pretend not to understand. Because you would have refused help. Because your pride, which is one of the things I admire most about you, wouldn't allow you to accept anything from me. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he replied, finally looking into her eyes. "Not for the money or the business, but because," he hesitated, choosing his words, "because you've built something incredible, Alice. All by yourself, after I destroyed everything. You deserve for the world to see your talent. But giving up your commission, it was the easiest decision I've ever made," he interrupted softly. "Do you know what Gabriel said to me yesterday during our piano lesson?" Alice shook her head, still processing the conversation. "He said that you're his superhero, that even when you're tired after work, you always have the energy to read stories to him, to help with his homework, to make pancakes on Sunday mornings." Henrique smiled sadly. "And he's right. You're extraordinary, Alice. You always have been. I was just too busy counting money to notice." A heavy silence fell between them, filled only by the buzz of the cafe and the distant sound of traffic. "Gabriel has a piano performance next week," Alice finally said. "He wants to surprise you. I know he's been practicing a lot. He also asked—" Alice hesitated, playing with her napkin. "He asked if we could all have dinner together afterwards. As a family." Henry's eyes widened slightly. "And what did you say?" "I said I needed to think about it," she admitted. "But now, after knowing what you did—" "Alice," Henry interrupted her gently, "I didn't do this expecting anything in return. Every moment I have with Gabriel, every smile, every hug, it's more than I deserve. I'm not trying to buy my way back into your lives." "I know," she whispered. "That's why, for the first time in 5 years, I'm considering that maybe we can try to be a family again. Not like before, but in a new way." Alice's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Gabriel's school. Attached was a photo of him smiling next to a science project, a miniature solar system. "He's got your eyes," Henrique commented, looking at the photo across the table, "but his smile is identical to yours." "And his stubbornness," Alice added with a small smile. "Poor child," Henry laughed softly. "He didn't stand a chance." When they left the cafe, the New York spring was in full force, with cherry blossom petals dancing in the air. Alice watched Henrique walk towards the subway, his back straight despite the suit that was no longer Italian, but still dignified. "Henrique," she called impulsively. He turned around. "Dinner after the presentation. At 7 is fine with you." The smile that lit up his face was answer enough. The recital hall of the Manhattan School of Music glowed under the soft lights, as anxious parents took their places in the rows of upholstered chairs. Alice was adjusting Gabriel's little suit for the last time backstage, her heart beating as hard as her son's. "Are you nervous, love?" she asked, tidying up an unruly curl that insisted on falling over the boy's eyes. "A little," Gabriel admitted, his fingers drumming invisible piano keys in the air, a habit he had developed over the last few weeks of intensive practice. "But Dad says nervous is good. It means we care." Alice smiled, remembering the extra lessons Enrique had organized, sitting patiently next to Gabriel for hours, even though he didn't know anything about music, just to offer moral support. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice of the piano teacher, Tite Madame Laurent, echoed through the sound system, "welcome to the spring recital of our young musicians." The performances began, each child taking to the stage with varying levels of confidence and skill. Gabriel would be the last to perform, a decision made by his teacher, who had recognized his natural talent for music. Enrique arrived discreetly during the third performance, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers, Gabriel's favorite flowers. Alice eyed him, noticing how different he seemed from the man she had met years ago. There was a softness in his gestures, a humility in his gaze that made him almost unrecognizable. "And now," announced Madame Laurent, "our last presenter of the evening, Gabriel Henderson Blackwood, performing Beethoven's Für Elise." A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. The piece was considerably more complex than those previously performed. Alice held her breath as Gabriel walked over to the piano, adjusted the bench as he had practiced hundreds of times, and placed his hands on the keys. The first notes flowed with surprising delicacy for someone so young. Alice could see the absolute concentration on her son's face, the same expression Henry had mentioned in therapy, his tongue slightly showing at the corner of his mouth. In the third row, Henry was leaning forward, completely absorbed. His eyes sparkled in a way that Alice recognized. It was the same sparkle she saw in the mirror every morning when she thought of her son. Gabriel reached the most challenging part of the piece, where the notes became more complex and faster. For a moment, his fingers hesitated, and Alice felt her heart stop. But then something extraordinary happened. Gabriel looked out at the audience, met his parents' eyes, and a small smile appeared on his lips. With renewed confidence, he took up the melody, his small hands dancing over the keys as if they had been made for that moment. When the last note resounded through the room, there was a moment of absolute silence before the audience erupted into applause. Gabriel stood up, bowed as Madame Laurent had taught him, and then, breaking protocol, ran straight into his parents' arms. "You did it, my love," Alice exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "That was incredible, champ," Henry added, handing over the sunflowers. "Beethoven would have been proud." "Can we go to dinner now?" Gabriel asked, his eyes shining with anticipation. "I'm starving." In the small Italian restaurant they had chosen, Gabriel sat between his parents, still buzzing with the energy of the performance. The waiter brought out a special children's menu, but Gabriel insisted on looking at the adult menu, carefully pronouncing each word in Italian. "Spaghetti alla carbonara," he declared proudly. "Just like Dad taught me to speak." Alice raised an eyebrow at Henry, who shrugged with a shy smile. "We've been practicing Italian on our Thursday afternoons. Between piano and Italian, he'll soon be more cultured than both of us put together," Alice joked. "Già sono," Gabriel replied with a mischievous grin, making his parents laugh. During dinner, Alice observed how the conversation flowed naturally between the three of them, as if years of separation had never existed. Gabriel would tell stories from school, Henry would share memories of his own childhood in Italy, and Alice would occasionally add her own observations. "Can I order dessert?" Gabriel asked after thoroughly cleaning his plate. "Of course you can, champ. You deserve it," Henrique replied, but his eyes sought approval from Alice, who nodded with a smile. While Gabriel studied the dessert menu with the same intensity he had devoted to Beethoven, Alice felt something change in the air between her and Henrique. It wasn't love, at least not like before, but there was a mutual understanding, a renewed respect born from the ashes of their past. "Thank you," Henry said softly, just for her to hear, "for giving me the chance to be part of this." Alice watched her son, so perfectly balanced between the two of them, and replied just as softly, "Thank you for becoming someone worthy of that chance." Summer arrived in New York with a merciless heat wave, turning the streets into corridors of hot, heavy air. In Dr. Martinez's office, Alice settled into the familiar leather sofa, an unexpected decision having brought her there, this time for her own session. "It's strange being here," Alice admitted, looking out over the same Central Park that Henry saw in his sessions. "I've always been the strong one, you know, the one who didn't need help." "Strength doesn't mean an absence of vulnerability, Alice," the therapist replied softly. "What brought you here today?" Alice took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. Gabriel asked yesterday if his father could sleep over sometimes. He said that his friend Thomas has 2 bedrooms, one at his mother's and one at his father's, but that he'd prefer it if we all lived together. "And how did you feel about that request?" "Terrified," Alice laughed humorlessly, "and at the same time, not as terrified as I should have been. It's confusing." Dr. Martinez made a few notes before continuing. "Are you afraid of trusting Henry again?" "I'm afraid that I already am," Alice replied, surprising herself with her honesty. "Over the last few months, he's been different, not just with Gabriel, but with me too. Respectful, present, humble even. And that scares you." "It scares me because—" Alice paused, feeling unexpected tears forming. "Because it's easier to hate the man he was than to admit that I love the man he has become." The silence that followed was filled only by the distant sound of the city outside. Dr. Martinez waited patiently while Alice wiped away her tears. "Yesterday," Alice continued, "Gabriel had a choir performance at school. Henry arrived early, helped organize the chairs, talked to the other parents. Nothing extraordinary, except," she smiled sadly, "except that the old Henry would never have done it. He would have considered that kind of task beneath his station. People can change, Alice." "I know. It's just that—" She hesitated. "What if I'm seeing what I want to see? What if Gabriel is seeing what he wants to see?" Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about what you see." "I see a man who takes the subway to save money for his son's piano lessons, who sits on the floor to play dinosaurs, even though he's wearing his only good suit, who looks at Gabriel as if he were the 8th wonder of the world." Alice paused. "And sometimes he looks at me the same way. And how does that make you feel?" "Scared, hopeful, furious at being hopeful." Alice laughed nervously. "All the possible emotions at the same time." Alice, the therapist said softly, have you ever considered that perhaps the real fear is not of trusting Henry, but of trusting yourself? The question struck Alice like a thunderbolt. What do you mean? You built very high walls after the divorce. Walls that protected you, that allowed you to raise Gabriel alone, to build your business. But walls can also prevent us from seeing genuine change. At that moment, Alice's cell phone vibrated. A message from Henrique, with a photo of Gabriel asleep on the sofa in his office, surrounded by Italian books and sheet music. He insisted on visiting me after school, the message said. He said he needed to practice with the best Italian teacher in the world. He ended up falling asleep studying Mozart. Alice felt something warm spread in her chest when she saw the way Henry had carefully covered Gabriel with his own blazer. You know what's most ironic? Alice commented, showing the photo to Dr. Martinez. Henrique has lost everything, money, status, power, but for the first time since I've known him, he looks truly rich. And you? How do you feel about this new wealth? As if Alice searched for the right words. Like maybe it's time to lower some walls. Not all of them, not at once, but enough to let in a little more light. When the session ended, Alice found Henrique and Gabriel waiting in the lobby of the building. Her son was still drowsy, snuggled in his father's arms. He didn't want to leave without saying goodbye to you, Henrique explained quietly. Alice watched the two of them, her little miracle, and the man who was learning to be worthy of it. Maybe Dr. Martinez was right. Maybe it was time to trust not only Henry, but her own ability to recognize true change. How about pizza for dinner? She suggested. At our place? Henrique's smile was cautious, hopeful, genuine. That would be perfect. Alice's apartment in Brooklyn had the comforting scent of homemade tomato sauce and fresh basil. In the small kitchen, Gabriel was perched on a stool, spreading grated cheese over the pizza dough he himself had helped to stretch, while Henry carefully sliced cherry tomatoes. More cheese, Dad? Gabriel asked, his hands already covered in mozzarella. I think there's enough cheese to feed all of Italy, champ, Enrique laughed, exchanging an amused glance with Alice, who was watching the scene leaning against the doorframe. The domesticity of the moment didn't go unnoticed by any of the adults. It was the first time in 5 years that Henrique had been there, in the space that Alice had carefully built for her and Gabriel after their divorce. Mum, Gabriel called out, interrupting her thoughts, can we eat in the living room watching a movie? Please. Alice hesitated. Rules were important, and dining at the table was one of them. But there was something special about the evening, something that called for an exception. Just tonight, she conceded, making Gabriel's eyes sparkle. But first, go wash those hands full of cheese. As Gabriel bounced off towards the bathroom, a comfortable silence settled between Alice and Henry. Your apartment is lovely, he commented, noticing the details that made the place feel like a real home. Photos of Gabriel everywhere, his drawings framed on the walls, well-tended plants in the windows. It's small, Alice shrugged, but it's ours. It's perfect, Henrique corrected gently, like everything you do. Before Alice could reply, Gabriel came running back, now with clean hands and a DVD in hand. Can we watch up? He asked, showing the movie. The teacher said it's about never giving up on your dreams. The three of them settled down in the living room, Gabriel between his parents on the sofa, the warm pizza on the coffee table, the movie starting on the TV. The opening sequence of the movie, showing Carl and Ellie's love story, created a moment of tension in the air. Alice could feel Henry stir uncomfortably next to her. Dad, Gabriel whispered during a particularly emotional scene, why did you give up on Mum? The silence that followed was deafening. Alice considered intervening, changing the subject, protecting her son from the painful truth. But Henrique settled down on the sofa, looked into Gabriel's eyes and answered with an honesty she would never have expected from the man she had known years ago. Because I was silly, son, he said softly. Sometimes people confuse what's really important in life. I used to think that money and power were more important than love and family. It took me a long time to realize that I was wrong. Gabriel processed the information for a moment. But now you know what's important. Now I know, Henry confirmed, his eyes meeting Alice's for a brief moment. And I promise never to forget. The movie continued, but Alice barely paid attention. Her mind was on Henrique's words, the simplicity and sincerity with which he had answered such a difficult question. When the credits started rolling, Gabriel was already dozing off, his head resting on Alice's lap, his feet on Henrique's legs. I'll put him to bed, Henrique offered quietly. Alice nodded. watching as he carefully took Gabriel in his arms, as if he were carrying the most precious of treasures. A few minutes later, Henry returned to the living room, where Alice was collecting the dishes. "He asked for a story," he said. "Would it be all right if I—" "Of course," she replied. The dinosaur book is his favorite at the moment. When Henry returned for the second time, he found Alice on the balcony, gazing at the city lights. "He's asleep," he informed her, joining her in the small space, in the middle of the story about the Triceratops. Alice smiled. "He always sleeps through that part." The silence that followed was different from the previous ones, laden with unspoken words, unexplored possibilities. "Alice," Henry began, his voice low but firm, "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but—" "You can come more often," she interrupted him, surprising them both. "For dinner, to help with homework, to be there. Gabriel needs it. And maybe—" She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Maybe us too." Henrique absorbed her words in silence, his gaze fixed on the city lights. "Thank you," he said at last, "for giving me a chance to be part of this family again, even if it's different from before." "Different can be good," Alice replied, remembering Dr. Martinez's words about lowering walls. When Henry left that night, there was a lightness in the air that neither of them could fully explain. Perhaps it was the smell of homemade pizza still lingering in the kitchen, or the distant sound of Gabriel's quiet breathing in his room, or simply the feeling that sometimes endings can also be beginnings. Autumn was painting Prospect Park in shades of red and gold when Alice received the phone call that would change everything. Charlotte, her lawyer and friend, had news about her company's latest investments. "Alice, you need to see this." Charlotte's voice was brimming with enthusiasm. "Your company's shares have tripled. That digital campaign you developed for the green technology startup, it's blowing up all over the country." Sitting in her office, Alice could hardly believe the figures that appeared on her screen. Years of hard work were finally bearing exponential fruit. "There's more," Charlotte continued. "Remember those investors that Henry directed to you? They want to expand the partnership. We're talking numbers that could make your company one of the largest in the sector on the East Coast." Alice felt her world spin for a moment. Success. The kind of success she had only dared to dream about during the lonely nights after her divorce, when Gabriel slept and she worked herself to exhaustion. "I need to tell Gabriel," was her first reaction. "Actually," Charlotte hesitated, "I think you should tell Henry first." "Why?" "Because part of that success, well, he played a part in it, not just for the investors, but—" Charlotte paused. "He's been turning down consultancy offers so as not to compete with your company. I found that out today." Alice slumped in her chair, absorbing the information. The old Henry would never have done something like that. The old Henry would have seen her vulnerability as a business opportunity. That afternoon, she met Henrique in the small cafe where he now worked as a freelance financial consultant. It was a modest place, very different from the luxurious offices he used to frequent. "Alice?" He seemed surprised to see her. "Has something happened to Gabriel?" "No," she smiled, taking a seat opposite him. "Actually, I came to talk about business." As she explained the company's success, the new investments, how her decisions had contributed to it, Henrique just listened, a serene smile on his face. "Why didn't you tell me you were turning down jobs?" she finally asked. "Because it wasn't relevant," he replied simply. "You've built something incredible, Alice. I just, didn't want to get in your way." "What if," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "what if I wanted you in my way? Professionally speaking?" Henry raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What are you suggesting? A partnership? Your experience in corporate finance, combined with my expertise in digital marketing?" She made a vague gesture with her hands. "We could do something bigger, something that would allow us to spend more time with Gabriel." "Alice," Henry began, his voice serious, "are you sure? Working together, it would be complicated," she added. "But when has anything in our history ever been simple?" Just then, Alice's cell phone rang. It was Gabriel calling from school. "Mom," his voice was excited. "Guess what? I've been chosen to be the main narrator of the Christmas play." "That's wonderful, love," Alice replied, putting the phone on speaker so that Henry could hear. "Is Dad there?" Gabriel asked, noticing the change in sound. "I'm here, champ," Enrique replied. "Very proud of you. So can you come and pick me up together today? Please." Alice and Enrique exchanged glances. There was so much to discuss, so much to plan, but at that moment, the answer was simple. "Of course, yes," they replied in unison. Later, As they walked through the park with Gabriel between them, excitedly telling him about his role in the play, Alice realized something important. Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't measured in numbers or contracts, but in moments like that. "You know," Henry commented quietly as Gabriel ran ahead to feed the ducks, "I think I've finally got it." "Understood what?" "Why we went bankrupt 5 years ago," he replied, his eyes fixed on his son. "I was investing in the wrong things." Alice felt something warm spread in her chest, a mixture of understanding and forgiveness that she didn't know she was holding in. "And now?" she asked. "Now," Henry smiled, watching Gabriel run back towards them. "Now I'm investing in what really matters, and this time I promise not to waste the dividends." Gabriel caught up with them, holding out a gold leaf he had found. "Look, it's the color of the sun," he exclaimed, handing the leaf to Alice. "It's beautiful, love," she replied, tucking the leaf into her bag, along with all the other little treasures her son collected. "Can we have some hot chocolate?" Gabriel asked hopefully. "And, Dad, can you tell us stories about Italy?" Alice looked at Henry, who was waiting for her answer with an expression that mixed hope and respect for his limits. "Yes," she replied, surprising herself with the ease of the decision. "I think it's time we made some new stories." The end. If you were Alice, after seeing Henry's genuine transformation from a man obsessed with power and money to a devoted and humble father, would you be able to lower your emotional walls and give love a second chance, or are some scars too deep to allow a new attempt? Your participation in the channel is very important. Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.